Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me as always, Brittany.
I want to pick your brain on something that you did this week. You looked through the unredacted Epstein files. Walk us through that experience. What was it like?
I did. Unfortunately, the transparency law that we passed to require the unredacted version of the Epstein files to be public was violated by the Trump administration because when the files were released and under that law, there were thousands and thousands of redactions. Now, had they just been redactions of the names of victims as the law required, then that would have been one thing. But it was very clear that there was far more than that. And so we have an opportunity at the Department of Justice to go and look at the unredacted version. And what I saw, Brittany, was incredibly disturbing. There were not only government lawyers who were involved in the negotiation of the sweetheart deal that Epstein got, whose names were redacted illegally, but also I saw the names of individuals like a billionaire hedge fund manager who was implicated in the likelihood that he knew about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, traveled to Jeffrey Epstein's island, was on his plane, and it clearly indicated that that he had that information. Why wasn't he interviewed? Why isn't the FBI investigating him? These are things that absolutely should occur so that the Epstein survivors can get a measure of justice. There was another name redacted that was of a private investigator who was accused of going into Jeffrey Epstein's home to remove items to hide his crimes. And his name was redacted. Why isn't he being investigated? Why hasn't he been brought before the Oversight Committee to testify about what he knew? So, I mean, that just scratches the surface, and it's all incredibly disturbing, unlawful, and I'm going to just continue to fight for the full transparency that the public and the survivors deserve.
Those types of names weren't supposed to be redacted. So the next question is obviously, why were they redacted, right? Has the DOJ said anything? Because there's millions and millions of documents, and I'm sure there's probably a mistake or two on redactions, but you think that this is a cover-up, right?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, there's just too many names for it not to be a cover-up. I mean, when I was looking through the files, there were government lawyers who were discussing their concern over the possibility that Ghislaine Maxwell was going to get a pardon in 2020. I mean, and these were lawyers that were concerned and seemed in the correspondence not to want to get her, to have her get a pardon. There was another series of names that were redacted that shouldn't have been, where they were discussing something that was unethical and suggested that the email should be deleted. And those names were redacted. It's certainly possible that, and even likely that some of the names were accidentally redacted, but there are thousands of redactions. And I mean, just by example, the number of times that government lawyers involved in the negotiation over the sweetheart deal that Jeffrey Epstein got whose names were redacted, none of them should be redacted ever, and they were redacted countless times.
What's the DOJ's excuse for why there were all these redactions then? What have they said to you?
They haven't really said much of anything. I mean, it's not clear. It shouldn't even be that we have to go down as members of Congress to the Department of Justice, sit in front of only 4 computers for limited periods of time to be able to review the files. The names should all be redacted. They shouldn't be hidden. And the names should all be uncovered. They shouldn't be hidden. And they're only being hidden to protect guilty people who absolutely should be investigated, who should potentially be prosecuted, and should certainly some of them be brought in front of the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee. Now, what I've done, because we have to continue the fight here for full transparency and also for accountability, is I've introduced legislation called the No Escaping Justice Act. That legislation would make sure that foreign perpetrators that committed the crimes that Jeffrey Epstein helped propagate would lose their visa privileges to enter the United States, and their assets would be frozen in the United States banks as well. Because there's no way that we should be allowing people who have committed these kinds of heinous crimes into the United States, and they certainly shouldn't have access to their assets and should be under full investigation and held accountable.
If these names are illegally redacted, if you're saying this is a cover-up for the rich and the powerful, can you share who these names are?
I mean, for now, I'd prefer to just describe who they are, and you can the two instances that I just named, both of them have had their names publicly described, so it's certainly not difficult to figure out who I'm talking about. But for now, I'll just describe them, and I'm going to continue to pursue reviewing the files so I can get to the bottom of more individuals who definitely, or at least allegedly, seem to have been directly involved in either helping Jeffrey Epstein commit his crimes, or were very aware of them and did nothing, and make sure that we can help get some justice brought to bear for these victims.
I keep coming back to this point, but I'm really curious how these names got redacted. I mean, who gave the order to redact them?
I mean, the trail leads right to Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi has the absolute ability and the requirement under the law to have released all of the files with only the names of victims redacted and no one else. And there are thousands of hidden names, and it's clear to me that they are hiding those names in almost all cases to protect guilty people, to put obstacles in the path of the possibility of having these people who committed heinous crimes against minors, or were aware of and looked the other way of heinous crimes committed against minors, and allow them to get away with it.